Hello, and welcome to the legislative update from Disability Rights South Dakota. We're going to cover the bills that are in their present form for January 24, 2023. These bills are currently being heard up at the South Dakota Capitol by your senators and House members. You see here on this screen the bills that we'll be covering today. You might notice from the last video there's been several bills added. These are all bills that were directly related to people with disabilities and their families in South Dakota. First bill we'll talk about is House Bill 1010. This again repeals a sunset date for provisions related to the licensure of behavior analysts. There's been a lot of work done in this last week. It made it through House Health and Human Services unanimously, went to the House of Representatives where it was passed, and has moved over to the Senate side and has been assigned to the Senate Health and Human Services, scheduled for hearing in room 412 on Wednesday, January 25th, first thing in the morning. Next bill, House Bill 1014. This is to update provisions related to the licensure of speech-language pathologists and speech-language pathology assistants. This is just to update the licensure processes for speech-language pathologists once the certification for those positions had been changed a few years ago. This also made it through the House Health and Human Services. Do pass. This was not a unanimous escape from that committee. However, it did go to the floor at the House of Representatives, and it was passed and sent over to the Senate Health and Human Services Committee, and has been scheduled for hearing also on Wednesday, January 25th, room 412, first thing in the morning. House Bill 1034. This modifies tax refunds for elderly persons and persons with a disability, and to make appropriations therefore and declare an emergency. What does this do? This creates a fund of $450,000 to provide refunds directly to elderly and disabled persons for property taxes and sales taxes. It also modifies the income limits for eligibility to receive these refunds. This has been referred to the Joint Committee on Appropriations, scheduled for hearing Thursday, January 26th, in room 362, from 9 a.m. till noon. Next bill, House Bill 1037. This is just a language cleanup to amend the eligibility for admission to the state's Veterans Home. But it also provides a preference to South Dakota residents for admissions to the South Dakota State's Veterans Home, as opposed to requiring residency as it had before. This has been referred to the House Military and Veterans Affairs and will be heard on Monday, January 23rd, which now is yesterday, in room 413. If you'd like to know what had happened here, you can go to the House Military and Veterans Affairs Committee page, find the PDF or the audio file associated with January 23rd, and listen in or read what the committee did on the bills that they had heard that day. House Bill 1044, make an appropriation to fund scholarships for individuals entering into the behavioral health field. This is an exciting bill, which means to address the need for people in the behavioral health field. It appropriates $20 million to the Department of Health for scholarships directly to students pursuing behavioral health careers and support individuals entering into that field. The participants who wish to receive such scholarship need to work in South Dakota for the amount of years that they had received that money from the state, plus an additional year. They must also promise to work in the field of behavioral health out in our communities. This has been referred to House Health and Human Services, not yet scheduled for hearing. House Bill 1046, to provide free tuition at the Board of Technical Education institutions for children or spouses of members of the South Dakota military members disabled or deceased in the line of duty. In order to be qualified for this, you must be a child or spouse of a member of the South Dakota National Guard. That soldier must have been disabled or deceased in the line of duty. This has been referred to House Military and Veterans Affairs, scheduled for hearing. It will be heard in room 413 on Wednesday, January 25th from 3 to 4:30. House Bill 1052, change the eligibility requirements of a property tax relief program for disabled veterans and surviving spouses. What this does is reduces the eligibility requirement from permanently and totally disabled to a rating of at least 70% disabled up to permanently and totally disabled. It also exempts a portion of the home from property taxation. This has been referred to House Taxation. And on January 19th, it was deferred to the 41st legislative day. What does that mean? There are not 41 days in the legislative calendar. Therefore, it died in committee. House Bill 1078, make an appropriation to the Department of Health, Human Services for the development and expansion of adult day services programs and to declare an emergency. This bill intends to appropriate $5 million for grants to DHS for the development and expansion of adult day services that serve adults with dementia or symptoms of dementia. This bill was first read and referred to the House Health and Human Services on January 17th and has not yet been scheduled for hearing. House Bill 1079. House Bill 1079 is similar in that it makes an appropriation to the Department of Health to provide grants to support mental health and suicide prevention programs and to declare an emergency. This bill means to appropriate $4 million to the Department of Health for grant programs directed toward youth and young adults that provide mental health and suicide prevention through support, peer support training, it commits mental health and suicide data services, and suicide loss response planning and support services. This one has been sent to the House Health and Human Services, scheduled for hearing. It will be heard on Tuesday, January 24th, first thing in the morning. House Bill 1086 creates provisions for the psychiatric collaborative care model to be reimbursable for insurance. This has been referred to the House Health and Human Services. It does just basically what it sounds like. It has insurance companies cover services in South Dakota, except for those policies which are limited in scope. But those that cover services for mental health or substance abuse disorders must also reimburse for such benefits that are delivered through the psychiatric collaborative health model. This was passed through committee. House Bill 1103. Waive the fee for non-driver identification cards for individuals at or below federal poverty level. This provides for free IDs, not driver's licenses, for people at or below poverty level. read into the House and referred to House Transportation. No hearing yet scheduled. House Concurrent Resolution 6002. Again, resolutions are non-binding. There's statements by the legislature to encourage an act or to recognize an individual under an act. In this case, House Concurrent Resolution 6002 is meant to encourage the executive board of the legislature to continue researching the childhood mental health and mental health services available to children in this state. This was referred to House Health and Human Services, scheduled for hearing Tuesday, January 24th, 2023, in room 412, first thing in the morning. House Concurrent Resolution 6003, also non-binding resolution encouraging the board of the legislature to authorize the interim legislative study for long-term care services for veterans, regardless of disability ratings, and to develop long-term care plans for VA-operated, purchased, and subsidized long-term care services. This has been read into the House State and referred to House State Affairs, scheduled for hearing. It will be heard on Wednesday, January 18th, which was last week, first thing in the morning. No updates beyond that hearing. Senate Bill 1, modify debilitating medical conditions for medical cannabis use. Again, this defines qualifying medical conditions for which medical cannabis can be prescribed. It removes the authority of the Department of Health to add conditions to the list of authorized medical conditions. It also removes South Dakota residents' ability to petition the Department of Health to add qualifying medical conditions. This lists out in black and white what conditions an individual can be prescribed medical cannabis. This sailed right through the Senate Health and Human Services. 6 yeas, 1 nay, went to the Senate floor, passed 20 yeas, and 15 senators voting no. It has now moved on to the House Health and Human Services and will be scheduled for hearing in that body. The next bill, Senate Bill 2, revised Department of Corrections reporting requirements concerning abuse, neglect of individuals in private contracted facilities. This has made it all the way through the process. This sailed right through. It was first read into Senate Judiciary. It was certified uncontested and placed on the Senate consent calendar. That's where they batch a bunch of different bills together in one body and in one chamber of the legislature. And so long as nobody objects to one of those bills, it gets passed as a group of bills. And that's what happened here. Once it was passed, it moved over to the House State Affairs Committee. It was scheduled for hearing. It was heard and passed through that committee uncontested. 12 yeas, no nays. Also certified uncontested and placed on the House's consent calendar. There, the House of Representatives and an entire body passed this bill 66-4. From here, it'll move on to the governor's desk for veto. If she does not veto this bill, it will become law. Senate Bill 4, modify a court's authority to commit a habitual juvenile offender to the Department of Corrections. This was sent to the Senate Judiciary Committee. And what this bill does is, so the Department of Correction, if placement with the Department of Correction is not, I apologize. If the Department of Correction is the least restrictive alternative for this individual, that means there's nothing that's less restrictive that would be beneficial to this person, and Here's the new language. The child has been previously adjudicated delinquent for separate delinquent acts arising out of separate and distinct criminal episodes 3 or more times in the preceding 6-month period. That child or delinquent individual may be placed at JDC. So it adds an extra layer of protection that somebody has to be a habitual offender in order to be sent to JDC. This has been scheduled for hearing, State Judiciary, or Senate Judiciary, on Thursday, January 26th in room 413, first thing in the morning, 7:45 to 9:45. Senate Bill 6 authorized community response teams to recommend alternative community-based resources for children alleged to be delinquent and children alleged to be in need of supervision or adjudication. This sets up a response team, a group of individuals, interdisciplinary teams, to address specific cases to identify community supports that may be available for a kid that's having difficulties or behaviors or engaging in certain criminal activity, to see if there's something that can be done for this kid prior to going to JDC. This has made it through the Senate. It was sent to Senate Judiciary, heard, uncontested, meaning no members of that committee voted against its passage. It was sent to the Senate floor, where it there passed on the consent calendar, unopposed, and now sent to House Judiciary. Senate Bill 7. Clarify emergency commitments of severely mentally ill persons by appropriate regional facilities. The language of the law previously stated that individuals can be committed on an emergency basis to hospitals. What this does is it adds the commitment location can also be appropriate regional facilities. That term is defined in law. It has been read and referred to Senate Judiciary, scheduled for hearing. It will be heard Tuesday, January 24th, 7:45 to 9:45 in room 413. Senate Bill 9 modifies discharge notice procedures applicable to developmentally disabled persons. This is for individuals who are receiving services at our state's ICF, Intermediate Care Facility. Those individuals need to be voluntarily admitted at the South Dakota Developmental Center. And once they reach to a point of discharge, previously they had to receive 10 days notice prior to that person's release. Now they're changing the law to follow federal guidelines, which states that if a client is to either be transferred or discharged, the facility must have documentation in the client's record that the client was transferred or discharged for good cause, and provide a reasonable time to prepare the client and his or her parents or guardian for the transfer or discharge, except in emergencies. So this is most likely a good thing. This can mean that the discharge can occur for in a time frame greater than 10 days if need be, less than 10 days if there have been arrangements made and that person is prepared to go off to another placement, maybe a less restrictive environment. Senate Bill 10 expands certification options for interpreters for the deaf. This is another bill that has been supported widely in the disability community. Everything that I've heard and run into indicates that providers, interpreters, people served see the expansion of certification options as a good thing. It makes more interpreters available based on the certification and the training that they've received. It was sent to Senate Health and Human Services there, scheduled for hearing and passed that Senate committee uncontested, placed on the consent calendar and passed through the Senate. It will be sent over to the House for consideration. Senate Bill 28, revise and repeal obsolete provisions related to the Department of Social Services. This is really just a language cleanup, what happened is the South Dakota School for the Deaf, the name was changed to the South Dakota Services for the Deaf. And it cleans up the language in the statute to reflect that change. It also adds and expands background checks for certain positions at the South Dakota Services for the Deaf and the South Dakota School for the Blind and Visually Impaired. This has been referred to the Senate Judiciary and scheduled for hearing. It will be heard Tuesday, January 24th in room 413 from 6:45 to 9:45. Senate Bill 37. Senate Bill 64. Repeal provisions related to the Jail Mental Health Screening Pilot Program and Oversight Council. They discontinued the pilot program previously put into place, and as such, no longer are there reporting requirements to the Oversight Council related to that pilot program. So that just cleans that language of that bill up. That was sent to Senate Judiciary, and it was heard Tuesday, January 24th in room 413 from 7:45 to 9:45. Senate Bill 91. Revise certain provisions regarding the crime of rape and provide penalty therefor. So what this does is, and no action has been taken on this, has not been read into the Senate, the floor of the Senate, nor has it been assigned to a committee. What this does is it add language requiring that a person had knowledge, that they knew or should have known that an individual was incapable of consent. What this does is add additional burden upon prosecutors to show that a person, an alleged abuser, knew or should have known that the person wasn't able to say that they wanted to engage in some particular activity, in this case sexual activity. It turns it from a strict liability crime to one that requires a mental state that they knew or should have known that this person was not able to consent to this activity. Those are the bills that we'll cover here this week up at the South Dakota Capitol. If you have any questions or like to discuss any of the legislation or how you can participate in the legislative process, please call us at Disability Rights South Dakota. See you next week.